So my topic is teepee tectonics, an analysis on how culture, beliefs, and traditions can positively affect Lakota tribal housing. Um, so I'm focusing on the Standing Rock Sioux tribe, which is located on the South Dakota, North Dakota border. This is just a background on how Standing Rock came to be through treaties, acts, and different types of events. So the Standing Rock Sioux tribe is, this is how they are branched off from the Ocechee-Sakowing, which is the 7 council fires. They are Lakota, and the main bands living on the reservation is Miniconjo and Hunkpapa. So teepees are the nomadic vernacular architecture of the Plains natives. It's the ideal structure for the culture of the people and the location of the Plains. So they had a nomadic lifestyle where they followed buffalo herds, and they had seasonal routes of travel, where in the summer they had shorter term stays on warm days in grassy flat areas. And in the winter, they sheltered along streams or valleys, and they went to the Black Hills for long-term shelter for the harsh winter. These are travois, and these are A-frame structures that were used on horses or dogs that were used to transport belongings and the teepee itself. And the teepee was taken, pretty much owned by the women in the families, and it could be assembled and disassembled very quickly assembled in like 15 minutes and taken down in like 5. So looking at the structure of the teepee, the poles were harvested from the Black Hills in early spring after the long winter, and the amount of poles were determined by the size of the teepee, typically ranging between 8 to 20. 3 to 4 of the heaviest poles were created to a tripod in which all the other poles were leaned against to strengthen the structure. The diameter ranged from 7 to 30 feet, and the exterior shell was constructed from brain-tanned hides that were stitched together with sinew. And the hides are placed on the poles using a lifting pole, which is seen angled on the right. And the hides were joined together with wooden pins on the left in the front. And the teepee was waterproofed by closing it completely using the smoke flaps. And they smoked out the interior to help make it weatherproof and durable and soft for the seasonal changes. So the smoke flaps had poles that were able to adjust the type of ventilation or airflow through the teepee, and it allowed the different type of control over that. The thing with the lining, so there's a lining in the interior of the teepee, and the lining was hung in a way where the water was able to flow directly down the poles and not into the interior of the teepee. It helped create a type of barrier that protect the interior from water and air drafts. And the water of the teepee that when it rained was able to drain out because they dug trenches around it to release the water from the interior of the teepee. So the teepee had different types of ways to adapt to the weathers. Whether if it's heat, they rolled up the sides and pinned it up to let airflow circulate underneath. And in high heat or extreme cold, they added extra thermal insulation on the exterior through massing of different branches and stuff to kind of create thicker walls in terms of retaining heat or trying to keep a cooler interior versus the exterior. So symbolically, the entrance faced east and to greet the sunrise, and that's in Lakota teepees. The circular footprint resembles a circle of life, and there's like a clockwise circulation. The teepee poles are grounded by Mother Earth and reach for Father Sky. And the poles were seen as a link between the earth and the spiritual world. So the teepee has symbolic meaning throughout the entire structure, and the decor and colors kind of reflected the symbolicness as well. So looking at the community of Rock Creek, it's located on the Standing Rock Sioux Reservation, and there's 8 districts within the reservation. Rock Creek District, or the community of Rock Creek itself, there's a picture on the left that was kind of taken from the early 1900s, and on the right is the current day community. So the community has an average household size of 5, and there are a total of 73 households. Before we can look at the community, we got to look at the colonization that occurred, and in terms of land for farming and allotments, and in terms of residential boarding schools, and how those really impacted the generations after. So there's this trauma that's there from children being stolen from their homes, stripped of their culture and beliefs, and forced to assimilate to white customs. A lot of these children were taken to these schools where they were told to like basically kill the Indian in him and save the man. So these kids were often had hunger, overcrowding, disease, and hard labor, no parents around. And this happened for a very long period of time. And basically up until like 1978, they made the Indian Child Welfare Act, when parents were finally given the legal right to deny their children's placement in these off-reservation schools. So the citizenship of the Lakota people was granted in 1924, so less than 100 years ago. And now we're looking at today's generation. There's a lot of trauma that's still present in these families. And you can see that the housing itself is having a crisis, and the housing crisis is a reflection of that trauma. And these homes, there are a lot of issues that happen in HUD housing and the housing within the community, in terms of lack of space, lack of natural light, lack of privacy, poor ventilation. So these are just a lot of issues that occur for these families, but they still make it a place to be home to, in terms of having the need of having these multi-generational families within. How can these families have the space with, they just make it work with unfinished basements that serve as makeshift bedrooms.
1 minute.
So these homes are located, these are the homes that are currently in Rock Creek. And so I kind of looked at the current tribal housing issues of what I was just talking about, and like proposing new design strategies in which it can make up that space. So how can we translate those early Lakota design methods of the teepee itself, and what are translations in those modern terms, like what can be integrated within those structures? And so the Rock Creek community is agricultural based, and so they can have the economic opportunity to teach themselves new trades and skills to create the structures that they need for their community in terms of housing. So I proposed this design strategy that kind of like took a look at, in terms of like relationships between spaces, and like how can different amount of people fit into these homes to have family reunions or events or ceremonies, or like practice their culture in terms of having a grandparent suite along with their parents, and then the children, like giving them the room to grow and flourish in these spaces, and really start tying it in with different types of relations that were found in the teepee that aren't present in today's housing. So this is just kind of like thinking of ways of like creating the connection between culture and like tradition in terms of modern day architecture, and like ways in which like we can approach this in with relation to these native tribal communities. That's it.
Thanks. That was very close to being on time. So I guess now we have a little under 3 minutes for Q&A. Are there any questions from anybody here? I see just comments. Thank you. Comments of support. Very interesting research. I think it is a little hard. Marcos, did you have a question?
I did.
Saw your hand.
Selena,
oh, excellent.
Selena, I love this topic, and I love it because it's so challenging to that when you're trying to draw your own proposal, and how that might somehow be a continuation of a trajectory of your analysis of the kind of the historical material. And it makes me think about the nomadic aspect of the culture, and how one of the things that the teepee seems to be able to do is be able to move around. And so when you decided to propose something that does not, is that for you a kind of, do you think of it as a completely different form of life, or what do you think is lost in the moment that you go from something that moves to something that is static?
I think that in terms of like the teepee moving, that was purely because of the reason of following the buffalo herds. If the buffalo stayed in a single spot, we would probably stay in a single spot with them. So with no more herds moving, and we have grocery stores now, I believe that we don't need the need to move around, and we can stay planted where we are and have a home to like continue the growth of our family.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Selena?
I do have one, actually.
Sure.
Selena, well, thank you for sharing your research. I think it's beautiful. I think I have more questions. Can you go to the slide that you talk about materiality?
Was it this one or a different one?
Yeah, maybe that one. I think similar to what Marcus question about, right, something that was mobile, and then suddenly when you're proposing something that it starts to be more aesthetic, right? I think you went through the materiality very quickly. So I'm also wondering about walls and construction techniques, right, or labor. Did you get a chance to go through that, or is that something that you intended to expand in your research?
I'm definitely interested in exploring like the construction of this more like deeper, but like a big thing that I wanted to like have instilled in it is the idea of like using things that are available in the land base area, and considering that's a huge agriculture community and that they have the land to grow the crops, that why not use straw and use it as straw like wall construction in the to create like denser walls and stuff for thermal protect. Sorry, I am having a hard time speaking, but to like have that type of use of the land. So using wheat, because there's not a lot of trees in the area. There's not a lot of different types of like wood options and stuff. So it seems like what can we grow to like have like the walls be created from this, you know?
Mm-hmm.
All right, great question. Luciana, thanks for asking that. I think we've done our 10 minutes on this one. So thank you, Selena. We're gonna move on. Jared, Edgar
Thanks,
McKnight, you are up next.
That's good. Well, thank you
All
so
right,
much,
Floyd,
everyone.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and go.
All right, my name is Jared Edgar McKnight, and I'm thrilled to share my ongoing research, Criminalized for Their Very Existence, the Spatial Politics of Homelessness. My work began exploring the explicit and implicit nature of policy and design, looking at the systems of rules, codes, and ordinances that govern human behaviors in our civic spaces in Los Angeles. Through a deep investigation into the Los Angeles Municipal Code and the complexity of regulations found across numerous chapters, articles, and sections of the code that can target specific individuals for the simple fact that they might not have another option for shelter, I began to reorganize the categories of regulations to better understand their spatial implications, finding that almost every instance of one's daily life and routine is punishable while unhoused. And our seemingly mundane public rights of way are the terrain of quite brutal landscapes for our unhoused communities to navigate. My research is now focused in Skid Row, exploring the democratization of our civic spaces to propose alternate ways that the landscape can be a material for social advancement to identify equitable futures in the designed environment. The largest congregate setting of LA County's 66,000 unhoused individuals resides in the streets of Skid Row. And for as long as it takes to deliver a housing solution, our unhoused communities will continue to suffer at the hands of our codified systems of regulation, like the LA Municipal Code, that restrict and criminalize their abilities to even exist in space. Skid Row has only 2 parks in its 51-block area, but it has over 28 intersections without crosswalks. I speculate as a means for more jaywalking citations. And since the 1970s, Skid Row has been an unofficial containment zone for homelessness, offering hundreds of resources to attract unhoused individuals away from tourist destinations. Enduring discrimination for their very existence, unhoused individuals must navigate the LAPD's yearly 14,000 misdemeanor arrests attributed to quality of life violations that prohibit sitting, lying, or sleeping on sidewalks, LAMC 4118. But to identify as LGBTQ and unhoused means to be doubly discriminated against. LGBTQ individuals and the 40% of unhoused youths who identify as LGBTQ are further oppressed by hate crimes, threats of physical violence, and tensions that encourage many to conceal their own identities in order to access resources and survive. Though over 12% of the Skid Row community identifies as LGBTQIA+, there exists no specific resources for LGBTQ individuals in the constrained resourcefulness that is Skid Row. My research began in reading and mapping, but I also have spent significant time in Skid Row, documenting the existing conditions through drawings, sketching, writing, and model making to non-intrusively explore the unique conditions of the test site. My interest in the codified landscape stems from a desire to expose other intangible and unseen conditions that govern one's ability to have a dignified existence on the street, the effect of looking the other way and what that has on the unhoused individual's psyche, the physicality of hate crimes that shadow and threaten life on the streets, the increased policing, citations, and incarcerations, lack of accessible access to public restrooms, and hostile landscapes that criminalize the existence of the unhoused, and the enforced transiency that occurs in the process of a street sweep, when unhoused individuals are forced to just move along with only what they can carry in a 60-gallon container. I'm working to spatialize the LA Municipal Code to help the unhoused legibly understand how they can legally exist in public space, to identify opportunities that challenge these structures that isolate, exclude, and target the vulnerabilities of a community without other options. LAMC 5611 prohibits the storage of personal belongings within 10 feet of an operable entrance. My inquiry redirects that codified statement in the design of a multi-purpose shade structure enveloping that 10-foot radius, clearly defining where personal property is at risk of confiscation, while also providing a refuge for programmed services and a respite from excessive heat. A design that serves as a survival guide for the unhoused to more safely negotiate civic spaces as inclusive environments. Fostering a deeper sense of empathy for those least represented and those whose voices and identities are not often heard or designed for is at the core of my design process. I've conducted over 24 interviews as part of my research with individuals like Miss Phyllis and Joe and the team at the LA LGBT Center, where just last week I conducted a community engagement session with young adults experiencing homelessness. Designing my own materials to engage in listening sessions, I wanted to not only understand their experiences, but also inspire them to dream with me through a series of drawing exercises. This overwhelmingly emotional process allowed me to have 16 one-on-one conversations with unhoused LGBTQ individuals who invited me into a day into their own lives and experiences. These 16 beautiful and heartfelt interviews revealed a combined 50+ years of lived unhoused experiences, with notions into what the street does and could accommodate, information into the most important resources for individuals while they were experiencing homelessness, and what contributes to feelings of safety and danger at an extremely intimate scale. But the work also revealed their hopes and dreams and the wishes that extend beyond themselves, with a true desire to give back in meaningful ways to ensure that others would not have to endure those same experiences on the cold, hard, and painful concrete that is the foundation of much of their existence while unhoused. This engaged research revealed that no day is typical, and the unhoused experience in the landscapes that we design is a full 24-hour deal where sleep is never guaranteed and the length of the day is determined by one's ability to develop and repeat routines. So much of that daily experience tells people what they can't do, but I question, what if our landscapes can begin asserting what you can? What if our daily landscapes learned from these stories and invited us to dream and hope? What does it mean to design a landscape where someone can giggle, cry, dream, or even scream without judgment? How can a service physically reach out and embrace someone as they're approaching that often intimidating threshold of seeking help? How can we welcome emotions at a human scale through ideas that lessen the stress and trauma that already exist in these spaces and give someone an opportunity to do the things they might not think they can, pavilions to recharge your humanity? As I embark on the final month of this academic design research project, my work is focused on redefining our own registration of the typology of the sidewalk through the lens of the code, a design that legibly defines a new circulation system in Skid Row that's no longer limited to the cattle chute-like conditions that criminalize one's existence, but rather transforms those sidewalks into spaces that protect one's existence, allowing for a sense of community to build around shared resources that redirect the code's restrictions. To be unhoused is not to be sedentary in a tent. It's to be in a constant state of emotion and motion. And Skid Row should accommodate that and allow unhoused individuals to stake a more dignified claim in a landscape that so strictly governs their ability to even exist. Thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to hearing your questions and comments as I'll be continuing this work even after graduation and into the future.
Thank you, Jared. All right. Questions? Very excellent presentation and perfectly timed, of course. All right. Any questions for Jared? Allison, I'm sure you have a question.
There's a question in the chat. I think it's a good one.
Good. Okay, let's see. The chat is, I see. What are the shared resources?
So for me, as part of my process, I've really been learning from a lot of my engagement sessions. And for me, the shared resources really came from an existing study of what's currently not available. Especially in the experience of LGBTQ unhoused individuals, there are a lot of resources that require them to shield or mask their own identity in order to access them. A number of our sort of missions in Los Angeles are religiously affiliated and don't always welcome LGBTQ individuals into those resources. So part of this was sort of a fact-finding mission to understand what the most sort of useful resources are. And a lot of people, it's a sense of security, a sense of shelter, even in the unhoused state, support from family and friends, and then sort of very basic human needs like access to electricity, access to a quiet place to sort of touch down, a place to sort of be okay, feel okay, and then a lot of needs around sort of hygiene, showers, sort of laundry spaces where you can sort of change your clothes and sort of just have some sort of refreshed, hygienic sort of sense. So a lot of these are what's eventually going to be designed into what I'm calling these pavilions to recharge your humanity, spaces that sort of bring these resources to the street as part of this new circulation network.
Great. Any other questions? I don't see any more in the chat, but does anybody have a live question? Okay, if not, then making entrances to services more welcoming and the big dreams in about a minute, please.
Sure thing. So a lot of this research has really focused on the fact that so much of our landscape is actually codified as sort of criminalizing one's existence in it. So this map at the top here starts to sort of look at where are entrances to buildings, because each entrance means a 10-foot radius area that says, if you put personal property here, it can be confiscated. You can receive a citation of a few $100s, and you could even be imprisoned. So starting to look at sort of how to make things more welcoming is trying to redirect the programming of those spaces around entrances so that individuals aren't criminalized for existing in those spaces, but those services can actually kind of extend a sort of a welcome mat in a sense to be able to invite people in, because oftentimes when individuals are seeking services, the front door is sort of the most intimidating threshold. And sort of to be able to sort of access those as part of the sort of daily system that they navigate on a daily basis, being the streetscape and the sidewalk, I think that's kind of the big idea that I'm continuing to figure out over the next month.
Great, thank you very much. I think that's about it for
I just want to say,
sure.
I just wanted to commend you for your work. I was really impressed, and I would just, go on what you're doing.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Would love to learn more about it.
Definitely.
Yeah, me too, Jared. Congratulations. It's amazing research. I think you should present something with the LA LGBT Center, right? Something that you could, do you know their work? Are you familiar with their work?
That's actually who I did my engagement with, and I'm going to be presenting my final research and findings over the summer.
Great. Amazing.
Where finding means to make this work a continued project and actually make a lot of it a reality. So this is just the beginning.
Super. All
Thank
right,
you so much.
try to keep us on time a little bit. Wanting Zhu, you're the next presenter. Please share your screen. And 7 minutes, and I'll try, if there's any airspace, I'll try to break in and let you know when there's a minute left to go.
Okay.
So ready, set, and go.
Okay, hi, I'm Wanting. My topic is Justice for Next Generation, Emotional Therapy Among Unhoused Children. So we have more sense than ever to be part of this entire human race this year. So we have more awareness of establishing a collective consciousness, whether because of these health, political, or social reasons. A third homeless crisis that has been exacerbated by our current pandemic, leading us to considering our society as a whole to offer unique solutions to address this issue in terms of environment justice, social justice, and even fairness to next generation. So my topic, the topic I'm starting is these homeless children who living on street with mental health issue in Los Angeles, because I want to learn how shared civic space can support their participation with house children through integrated community programming to better understand how to decrease this traumatic impact of homeless children and to provide a process towards a brighter future. So these statistics showing that there is a huge amount of unhoused children in United States, approximately like 2.5 million children are homeless annually. 1 in every 20 children in California do not have a home, and 1/3 of all homeless people are children under the age of 18. So the site I'm choosing to address this issue is Macasa Park and its Westlake community. It is a large immigrant neighborhood with dense population of Central American, but low income after Immigrant Act passed in 1965, and upper classes moving from here to the West because of this Wilshire Boulevard built in 1960s. And also it is a place with highest concentration of children under the age of 16, but least amount of elementary and middle school as well in this LA basin. So it's a high population of homeless children with limited resources. And then I look into these intersections between unhoused children and mental health issue. I found that even under this Californian law, homeless children get special protection to get access to public education, but not all of them are enrolled in, whether it's enough resources or not, because they tend to struggle in school. They are more likely to drop out, be absent. They are stressed not only by the nature of shelter livings, but also by these interpersonal difficulties and mental problems. So this stress always associated with these trauma-related difficulties and interfere with recovery due to these ongoing traumatic reminders and challenges. So, and then I found several interviews with unhoused children to see that what their feelings and experience. I found that they often lived in parks, on the street, in front of church or library, lose sense of belongings, feels like they are not belong to the society, and they are afraid to tell their classmates they are homeless. So they are afraid not identified by the community, which also lead to this ongoing trauma-related difficulties. And they kind of have this sense of like boundary to this society. So then I compare this daily route of housed children and homeless children to see that the reason why they have this sense of boundary. So first, where do they live? Compared to the housed children, they have like stable home. So their route is from home to school. So it's 2 point and 1 line. So however, for homeless children, their home is either in front of church, library, or park. So their home is shifted and their route to schools is from different directions. Their home and activity zones is everywhere in the urban fabric. So I'm thinking that how to bring this same component from our typical homes, like the kitchen, study, and living room to this urban fabric so that they can have this sense of this home in the community. So this is what I'm starting right now. In order to do this, I looked what's their daily activities by tracking their daily route from day to night. I found that all the playing, programming, food services, and studies area is all placed either inside Makassar Park and or inside school. So there is nice area outside. These areas have opportunities for children to study, to play, or to get food. So how civic space can provide to support these unhoused children, I redefine this urban fabric by creating kitchen in nature, art therapy study, and interactive music living room near church, library, and school for them to get services and have this sense of home in this urban fabric and also healing their hurt. The kitchen in nature is nearby the church, cooperate with organizations and vendors to provide food and play for their basic needs. And edible gardens is also included in it. And its study room is near library to provide learning skills and art-related therapy classes and workshops. And this music interactive living room is nearby school to provide this emotional resilience through like collaborate games and sports. And I explore different types of landscape spaces related to the mental therapy by looking at their symptoms and behaviors of homeless children and what's their favors, which will lead to my further design for this community.
About 1 minute, one thing.
Okay, so this is all my research work. I leave this image here to think about what it is saying. So it kind of expressed all my design thinking method for this project is empathy design. So I start analysis with considering this special group unhoused children, their needs, simulating their daily route and how they use the spaces and test my design ideas to create a beautiful but practical interactive space so that children will smile unconsciously and arouse emotional resonance when they use the space. It represents the relationship between the people and the city, and it will be a place full of emotional therapy and joy. Yeah, thanks a lot. Any questions?
Perfect timing. Are there any questions for Wan-Ting? Wan-Ting, if there are no questions, I'm not seeing any questions. If you have any questions, if there's something you'd like feedback on, you have a couple minutes here of time you could use.
I think I have a question then. Well, first, I'm impressed with the research, right? I think the beautiful work that you're all presenting today. But it's interesting how you find a way to think about home through the city fabric, right? The urban fabric that you've been talking about. I think I don't know. I have with many thoughts now, but I'm kind of just wondering how, when you think about home, right, there's a certain boundary or a certain sense of shelter or comfort that comes to that, right? How do you sense that the city can embrace that one thing, right? Because it's such a different scale when you think urban scale, right? Or urban fabric to shelter, right? And I wonder for a child, how do you sense that change of scale when you're trying to highlight urban fabric space that can bring that sense of shelter?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because for this, like our stable homes, we kind of have this several functions like kitchen, we have food, and study rooms, and living room is where we like communicate and share ideas together. So I feel like this is a basic need for our human beings if we have a stable home. But for the children's, as I mentioned, their activities and the studies and playing programs around this Makassar Park is just inside the park. So I'm thinking that how to spread these programs and services into this urban fabric also provide the same functions of this kitchen, study, and living room. So basically the kitchen in nature, I wanted to create is kind of like systems around this church that cooperate with different organizations as a hub, so that they can get here to get food, and also this kind of self-efficient systems cooperate vendors, grow food or cooking food here, so that they can like get something like basic need for live in this urban fabric, not just inside the schools or parks, and also same to this art therapy studies, learning rooms inside the urban fabric, and also this music living room enable them to like cooperate together to like communicate each other to healing their hurt.
Okay, great. I think that's
Thank you.
all the time we have in the Q&A. Wan-Ting, thank you very much. And Guy or Guy, I know you're there. I see you.
Hello. Yeah, I go by Guy. So.
Okay, Guy. All right. You're up next. Please share your screen.
Get it? Oops. There. All right.
Okay, ready, set, and go.
All right. Hello, my name is Guy Laforet. I'm a fifth-year student studying and developing ideas to aid in the efforts to combat homelessness in Los Angeles. Given the magnitude of this task, I decided to propose ideas that will serve more of like a stepping stone to minimizing and destigmatizing homelessness, as opposed to finding like the end-all solution. And so my approach to this subject began as a thesis I wrote last semester, where I've concluded that the most effective way to achieve my goal is through the combination of full-scale urban reform and the rehabilitation of people experiencing homelessness. Among the four main classes of homelessness, I'm particularly interested in the transitional category, which comprises of adolescents ranging from 18 to 24 years old. And for me, I think this is from a practical perspective, rather, I do feel as though that the younger demographic is the pressing issue, especially because they have the greatest impact on the future. But that's not to say that my research or project is exclusive to just them. And so LA is experiencing an 18.5% increase in homeless youth since 2019, of which 61% points to economic hardships as their primary problem. And this is corroborated also by another study which attributes LA's homelessness crisis to the rapidly increasing living costs, which is not adequately met by suitable wages. But the silver lining here is that the homeless youth has one of the highest recovery rates, which indicates that there is a strong desire for them to get back on their feet. And so my research phase entailed the study of the current state of defensive and hostile architecture in LA. Urban design has been geared towards repelling a certain demographic, which perpetuates the segregation of various communities. And to even begin to address how homelessness can be mitigated, one has to first propose solutions that can call for inclusivity in public architecture. And so, of course, inclusivity doesn't just go one way. My design objective is to ensure that all existing parties can find equal value out of my proposed concept. And the way I see it, my project has two main goals. So the first one is the system has to be multifunctional and brings value to the city as a means of urban development. The second one is providing a dignifying shelter that meets more than just the bare requirements for human survival. And so my proposal is the Nomad system, which is a hypermobile shelter network that gives the users agency to embark on self-improving journeys without the limitation of being stuck in a single location. And the concept and name takes inspiration from modern herding tribes, where teamwork, trust, and mobility is the lifeline of nomadism. However, another feature of the term nomad is to aid in the recalibration of the negative public perception of the homeless. And by referring to the homeless as nomads, my intention is to bring to the public's attention the harsh realities of homeless living and to begin to destigmatize homelessness. And so the shelter unit is portable, but attempts to bridge the aesthetic gap between a tent on the pavement and a full-fledged home through the use of home-like typologies, operable fenestrations, and most importantly, access to water and electricity. The shelters, however, are not meant to evoke a sense of permanence, because the shelter is ultimately a stepping stone to full reintegration into society, and it is only meant as an aid to rehabilitate its users through a core lifestyle change. And I think the most important change is to give its users freedom and to fully embrace independence to traverse the city in pursuit of opportunities while still having the resources should they need the support. And in essence, the Nomad system is more of a transitionary strategy that helps its users develop the necessary skills and mindset to get back on their feet. And so the other part of the equation is the Nomad checkpoints, and these will serve as intermittent goals where nomads can journey to and from. And here the shelters can dock into several parking spots, which grants them access to electricity and water. Electricity is generated through bike generators on site and is capable of powering up small electronic appliances. But not only are these stations incentivized through its amenities, nomads will know where to go whenever they seek companionship or support. And the main idea is that the checkpoints will be strategically established within the urban fabric by city planners, because for one, this ensures that the Nomad system and its migration patterns aren't disruptive to existing traffic flows. But more importantly, these checkpoints, because they're not exclusive to Nomad users, city planners may insert the infrastructure into a variety of underdeveloped locations to create new public spaces and social hubs. And these checkpoints are configurable in a variety of patterns and sizes, but follows a hexagonal grid, which will be the most spatially efficient. And the process of construction should be relatively simple enough that new stations can be established quickly in response to any situation. And so in my current concept, I believe that the primary source of funding will come from the Department of Housing and Urban Development, who are key contributors to a variety of existing homeless initiatives with over $2.7 billion allocated through grants. And I also believe that for the construction of the components, organizers can utilize existing maker spaces in Los Angeles due to their abundance and affordability. And perhaps these communal workshops can host daily component building sessions, which will be open to anyone, including volunteers, as well as primary stakeholders of the project. For instance, future Nomad users may be incentivized to work on the construction of the components in exchange for a prioritized housing assignment. But also, I see this as an opportunity to implement an apprenticeship system that will eventually be fully run by the nomads themselves. And there will be plenty of positions that can be appointed to nomads who can, after completing the required training, they can become the next mentors. And by creating this internalized system, the Nomad users will gain valuable construction and communication skills that can be translated into the job market in the future. And so the design for the checkpoint has undergone several changes to better respond to the goals of my project. This new design places emphasis on incentives to further encourage nomads to dock into the stations at night. The change in design creates an additional pocket of space when a shelter is connected, giving its users access to extra seating, space, and storage, all of which are often highly requested. The partitions also have integrated lighting, which makes it unnecessary for dedicated lighting fixtures within the shelter.
49 seconds.
Okay, and these are some of the existing locations that may serve well for the Nomad system. For example, this station in particular is adjacent to a weekly food drive, which is much more accessible to the Nomads when compared to the half-mile walk they have to do from the nearest homeless shelter. This is an ideal configuration of the checkpoint, which is designed to provide adequate spacing between each docking station. However, the reality of the situation may call for a much more spatially efficient setup, and especially in high-density neighborhoods. So the adaptability of the checkpoint enables its transformation to high-occupancy communities that prioritizes the number of shelter spots. Conversely, the introduction of the specialized units can work in conjunction with shelters to transform the checkpoints into specialized public venues. And with mental and physical disabilities being just as important a factor as financial hardships, I intend on furthering my design to incorporate semi-permanent healthcare stations that may migrate from station to station on a fixed schedule. And with this future-proof strategy, I can prolong the usefulness of the checkpoints even if it no longer serves primarily as a shelter dock, thereby making the project worth investing in with future urban development in mind. And therefore, the Nomad system, in my opinion, is a new approach to address the current stigma and hostility faced by the homeless community. And through a citywide embrace of the checkpoints and the lifestyle change for its users, both parties are making strides to meet at the middle in order for the gradual reintegration of the homeless back into the society.
Thank you, Guy. Okay, so we have about 2 minutes and 15 seconds left. I want to ask you, I have a question finally. Storage. Like one of the things that I see that is so ever present and seems to be a huge need is storage space, like these tiny units. Well, what's your solution there?
Well, what I see is that a lot of people experiencing homelessness are often tied down to a single location because of the fact that they have so many possessions that they cannot safely transport from location to location. By having this mobile unit, which is collapsible and movable by a single person, it allows them to have their belongings all in a single package, and that can be safely transported to these checkpoints, which have additional storage that grants them these additional privileges that will help in their life.
Great. Okay. Other questions? I want to make sure we answer other questions if they're around. Anybody else? Sorry, it's hard for. I'm not seeing any blue hands in the participants. Anybody want to shout out a question?
I just want to congrats you, Guy. Spend the whole semester calling you Guy, right? Until I discovered you. Amazing work. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Anybody else? If not, thank you very much.
No, I didn't see a bathroom.
Here we go.
Yeah, I didn't see a bathroom in the design presentation. Did I miss that?
No, you're correct. The way that I will address that is through the use of specialized units, such as like the medical stations, but there will be dedicated units for bathrooms and showers units that can be transported from place to place. So they're more semi-permanent.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Guy. Please release the screen. And JP is up next.
Excellent.
All right. And
all right.
4, 3, 2, 1.
Thank you. So this is a research project in the very beginning stages, coming out of work with Dr. Errol Southers in the Price School of Policy, investigating the overlap between violent extremism and architecture and urbanism. The project sort of starts with the premise that violent extremism is preventable and that architecture and urbanism might have something to do with that. Starts obviously with an investigation of the sort of scales and scopes at which extremism operates on, most easily broken down into sort of these 5 categories, and a focus the community and group aspects of this sort of phenomenon in search of a solution. The second sort of hypothesis is that environmental factors can lead to extremism. Scholarship and practice in this field talks quite frequently about individuals finding extremist ideologies through communities, but there's emerging work that's drawing the connection in the other direction as well. How communities can sort of deliver or represent ideologies to individuals. Another hypothesis, anyone can be an extremist. A lot of times we talk about this phenomenon, obviously depending on how the person looks and how the person identifies. But we often talk about folks who are engaged in these ideologies as being on the margins of something, as being others, as being sort of alienated from social groups, which really affects how we might be able to confront this issue. The next hypothesis is that we can influence community networks by better understanding their structure, not as something that can be wholly constructed by even the most educated architect or urbanist, but as this organic system that if we want to hope to influence it, we have to not only understand it, but feed it in a more organic way at each of these nodes. Another hypothesis, social environments can foster violent extremism. I think the media, I think discourse, both politically and socially, would support this hypothesis. Not only sort of the physical environments that we see all too often, but the virtual environments and the more embedded social environments in our urban, suburban, and rural spaces. So sort of where this all starts to come together in terms of a connection to architecture and urbanism is the idea that social environments can in fact limit the spread of violent extremism. Current practice aims at sort of looking only at the action sort of at the end of this ecosystem and policing it and regulating it and trying to minimize it and keep folks safe from it. But what if the design of communities could sort of break this cycle, break this chain, insert itself into this ecosystem? And going one step further, what if design could empower individuals to create for themselves the communities and the networks and the social environments that make them resilient to these extremist ideologies? The main sort of discipline or field of study that links these two maybe seemingly disparate ideas together is the idea of crime prevention through environmental design, which came about in the 70s as sort of this discipline and this way of thinking about urbanism, and was implemented primarily through the idea of defensible space, but actually has its roots in the work of Jane Jacobs in the 60s on a sort of, again, organic and spontaneous and individual and social group centered urbanism. The image on the left is the Greenwich Village neighborhood that Jane Jacobs was writing about, was actively trying to protect. The image on the right is sort of the outgrowth of this idea of defensible space. So we can see that despite maybe coming from the same sort of ideals about the potential of design to create environments, we have two very contrasting sort of results. Looking really across the world at case studies of how policies are implemented to prevent violent extremism, we see a wide range of ideas and concepts focused on transdisciplinary work, focused on community interaction and intervention, and just now starting to understand the potential of individuals empowered by design to create communities that are both supportive and resilient against these sort of ideologies. The end goal sort of this project at the end of the semester, which again is sort of the beginning of a larger investigation, draws really heavily on these three bodies of work. On already mentioned Jane Jacobs, homegrown violent extremism sort of covers the breadth of the discipline that I'm totally unfamiliar with, and the work of Stacy Sutton and others in examining cooperative and other sorts of collective forms of urbanism has been super informative as well. The policy that I've sort of crafted as a milestone along the way is again about empowering individuals financially and spatially and collectively to impact the design of their communities, the resources that they have available to them. So that's where I'll leave the conversation for now, but really, excited to discuss with all of you and continue sort of this transdisciplinary conversation.
Thank you, JP. Do we have any questions? I see a question from Marco Sanchez.
JP, this is fascinating. I like your topic so much. I have to say it's so challenging and super interesting to think about, say, relationships between the kind of history and theory of environmental design and its link to the more contemporary problem. And it also makes me think about, I guess, the space of the computer in our lives, which tends to be the home or the domestic space. And I guess my question for you, and I know you didn't really talk about this, was because there were kind of stay-at-home orders over the last year, and people were spending more time at home, do you think that kind of domestic isolation put people more into contact with, over large populations, in contact with the internet in a way they hadn't been before, and thus had a kind of snowball effect to different kinds of social movements like the extremism that you're describing? Yeah, absolutely. I have colleagues in this course who are focusing more specifically on those issues. I think that that places a real impetus on the creation of these sort of virtual or digital environments as important as the physical ones that we share, and the understanding of how people interact with one another in those spaces. On the other hand, I think it emphasizes as well the importance of the real, the in-person, the tangible. Maybe that's my own personal bias, but I think that the understandings of these, maybe broadly, just the understanding of the different ways that folks interact with one another, and the potential of the environment, whether it is virtual or real, to shape the influences and the sort of communities and ideologies that are formed. I think that's a super interesting question that you bring up. Thank you, JP. Thank you.
Other questions? I'm not seeing, okay, I'm actually looking at the chat this time. I'm not seeing questions in the chat or hands raised. Going once, going twice, gone. Okay, JP, thank you very much. Next up is going to be Qingru Yang. Qingru, go ahead and share your screen, please.
Are you guys seeing my screen?
Yes, now we can see it. All right,
Okay.
Qingru, I'll try to wedge in and let you know when there's 1 minute left. So go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Hi, I'm Qingru. I'm a candidate from Master of Landscape Architecture 2 years program. I'm going to show my ongoing research about the role of leisure in the public place of Los Angeles in order to allow the unhoused population access to the momentary ease and well-being provided by leisure. So leisure is an important concept for the working class during the Industrial Revolution. Mass production lowers the price of the products, and the development of transportation lowers the cost of traveling, and new leisure activities emerge. The changing landscapes during the Industrial Revolution indicate that leisure is not only defined by privilege, but everyone in the society. However, is leisure represented activities on a neighbor scale context? The suitability and entry differences and from small Even leisures that are supposed to be everyone, like for the park, would be inaccessible to them. Leisure that live as a life, like enjoying the refreshed afternoon moment shop, lying down at the park for a bath.
Hey, Chingaru,
To
your
work.
sound's Chingaru, your sound is a little
We should
choppy.
say leisures.
Chingaru, maybe
Oh.
try turning off your video because your sound is a little choppy for us.
Oops.
Hi, Chingaru.
Hi.
I'm sorry. Could you try? Was was anybody else having issues with hearing Chingaru? Was it just okay? So Chingaru, maybe turn off your video. Try that and jump back in where you were. I'll
Okay.
try stopping my video too, and maybe that'll free up some bandwidth here.
Okay, sorry. Okay. So yeah, so the leisure we would perceive as a normal routine in our life would be something inaccessible for the unhoused people, or we should say this leisure are not belonging to them because of the misunderstanding, prejudice, and ignorance in our society. So I selected the MacArthur Park and its neighborhood as a specific site to study the changing landscape of leisure in the neighborhood. The tone of leisure in the neighborhood changed through time. The park used to be an urban green oasis targeted at the middle-class neighborhoods, surrounded by theater, art institute, coffee shop, luxury hotel, and single-family housing. With seal pools, native flora palettes, people paddling at the weekend, enjoying a moment of nature near downtown Los Angeles at the park. Now, after a huge demographic change after 1950, with the Central American immigrants moving, the theater became a swap meet, the coffee shop becomes a 99-cent store, the art institute becomes elementary school meeting the need of the dancer and dancer population. Although there are still some vacant lots left in the neighborhood, the Westlake residents turn the neighborhood into a place that celebrates diverse culture within the former structure. Just as the residents redefine the function of the architecture, the unhoused redefine the park and outdoor space as well, with the high maintenance needed programs being moved out from the park through town. There is more and more undefined space occurring at the south park of the park, which became an attraction or an opportunity for unhoused to settle their informal homes and create their community here. What I see from here is, although an unhoused republic might be controversial, I think it's like the 99-cent store and the swap meet. It shows an autonomous approach from people who actively change the physical space to support their life. It's not a diminish of leisure. It just creates a niche leisure for nowadays of their life. So it's kind of leisure emerged from the supported life, emerged from the dream of settling down at a new place, emerged from the hope for tomorrow. So my design re-understanding the city through the unhoused perspective. I mapped out the service resource to understand the daily routine of an unhoused in this neighborhood. I selected a nearby vacant lot and alley as a potential way to facilitate and enhance the experience of leisure in this neighbor. Alley is the thread to connect the scattered service in the city. A trail connect them to home. It became a neighborhood space for the unhoused community. Basic service like bulletin board, storage box, sitting area is being provided to increase the mobility and support the unhoused community. The city-owned vacant lot, which used to an unusable space near unhoused settlements, became an extension footprint of the MacArthur Park. Unhoused could wait here, enjoy a moment of leisure while they are waiting for the service or just hanging with friends. The 4 new parks has different theme of leisure according to the service provided around. Multi-generation meeting junction, food celebration, community courtyard for outdoor church will be adding in the neighborhood. And also a plaza regenerated program near the metro station will become the Vendor Broadway, a place celebrate the beauty of the park, the life on the streets, and the busy, lively community in its historic neighborhood. Yeah, I think this is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chingaru. Any questions for Chingaru? Chingaru, could you just spend a moment for me just going back over talking about this concept of leisure and what it means in your project.
So what leisure means to my project is that because when I look into the history of this area, it sometimes makes people feel like the leisure in the park is like diminished through time. But I think when we look into the big picture of this, how this neighborhood changed through time, I think it's not a neighborhood that's crowded or a lot of trash and people complaints, but it shows that the immigrants and the new residents in this city try to establish their life in Los Angeles. So I think the leisure for them is not fancy as before, which the park designed for the middle class neighborhood. Is like the daily leisure for them. So that's why I want to celebrate the people's life on the street, and also very simple experience like outdoor church or food plaza.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think we're going to move on to Aubrey. We're running just slightly behind, and sorry about those technical difficulties, Chingru. But Aubrey, are you ready to go? All right. And off you go.
Hi, everyone. My name is Avery, and this is my project Palimpsest, the USC Center for Social Justice, which I completed last semester. So before I talk about the project, I just wanted to talk about my design theory that I use whenever I'm starting a project. And so I believe that architecture must be community-based. Environmental and social sustainability are essential and are equal in their importance. I think that contextually respectful forms and innovative aesthetics must coexist, and that architects must be ethically conscious in all that they say and do, and that designs must strive for equity for people of all genders, abilities, and races. So hopefully you see that in my project today. Also, this project attempts to achieve the Living Building Challenge. So you'll see these icons on the side, and that's what they're trying to achieve, these different petals. So this project is located in Leimert Park, and before even designing, I did a ton of research into this area and the people who've lived there or have existed in that space all the way back to Indigenous peoples. And it moved up to the current present moment and acknowledging the possible struggles that these people might have faced over time. This area currently is occupied by predominantly African Americans, and that I also did analysis into the using Cal EnviroScreen into the climate of this area. So there's actually a lot of toxic chemicals in the air, and so people who are vulnerable to pollution are highly affected. And so that also helped to inform my designs moving forward. I also did a lot of analysis into the programming of this area. So our project is in blue, the site is in blue, but there's a lot of amazing cultural hubs all around, from the Museum of African American Art to the Vision Theater. And our project is right in the middle, so it has this perfect opportunity to really engage with the community and become a cultural hub in and of itself, not just a center for social justice. And also I would love to start to connect these different cultural hubs together, starting with my project. So this is the overall design that was created. I have a lot of public realm in my project where the community can really connect with one another. The people who are utilizing the services within the Social Justice Center can also utilize it. And also, if you notice, the ground markings start at my project, but they also start to go up and down the street to start to engage with those other cultural hubs along Crenshaw Boulevard. So this is what the site currently looks like. They're putting in a metro to the right of this project, and I'm activating the public realm, placing my building in. I know it's very tall, but hopefully it's being placed in a respectful manner. As I talked about, I activated that public realm, brought in a lot of trees and shading, and my favorite part is the amphitheater that you see here. I really wanted a place for the community to connect, grow, and collaborate together. And so this is also a place for performances that celebrate Black culture to occur. It's also a place for protests to occur. The Juneteenth parade also happens right along Crenshaw Boulevard. So this could also be a culmination or a stopping point in that parade. In the interior of the building, I really focused on creating dynamic spaces for that further collaboration between the community and the research partners that are working within the Center for Social Justice. So there's a lot of open floor plans, really dynamic spaces for you to look out onto the community and be further connected to it, as well as bleacher staircases for the community to utilize and the people working there to utilize. This section starts to acknowledge the layered history of this site, and this becomes a new layer that's promoting social justice that's being added to this site. And the programming, as you can see, each programming occupies about 2 levels and they share a bleacher staircase. So I have social justice services where people would come and be able to get legal services if they're facing injustices and inequities in their society. There's also opportunities for community engagement for the community to utilize this space, as well as social justice research by faculty and staff alike working at USC. And my top floor is also a garden space for the community to utilize as well. In terms of my facade, I really looked at different amounts of daylight and programmatic elements. And so where it was most public, like the bleacher staircases, I wanted to bring in the most light. And then I started to layer my facade up against that. My project is called Palimpsest, so it's all about layerings and history. So I thought my facade definitely needed to be layered as well. As you can see here, this is my unrolled elevation of my facade. In a perfect world, I would be able to go into this community and get their response. This is a community-based design, I'm hoping, in my imagination. So I would love to go and get their opinions on these things. But I wasn't able to do that. So I looked to other projects that were occurring, such as the Destination Crenshaw by Perkins and Will, and the community was a co-design partner throughout that process. So I believe that my project should emphasize the color schemes used there, because the community obviously was okay with those colors if they were a co-design partner. So that's how I created my color scheme. This is just a plug for what I'm doing currently. I am doing research with local high schoolers and getting participation. Community-based design is something I'm very passionate about. So I'm really focusing right now on my thesis on community agency and participatory design. So maybe that's another presentation. And then I believe that social and environmental sustainability are equal in their importance. So this project also emphasizes environmental sustainability through its energy conservation through solar panels. I also have titanium dioxide coating, which purifies the air, and the building itself is CLT, so it sequesters carbon dioxide. So it becomes a beacon for environmental and social sustainability. So overall,
Avery, I think we're about there.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so this is the end of my project. I'm adding a new layer to this project that remembers the past, celebrates the present, and creates an equitable future together. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Avery. Okay, questions about the palimpsests?
Sorry, I went over.
Students can ask questions too. Anybody, questions are open to anybody. Marcos.
Hey, Avery, I have a question for you. I wonder if legal access becomes something that is part of your program, or places to address disagreement through negotiation, whether it's with legal access or not.
Yeah, so the second and third floor of my program is social justice services. So the goal would be there are legal representatives. So the community and people could come from the metro, from all over, and utilize those services at a low cost or probably for free as well.
Thank you.
Other questions? Comments? I don't see. All right, again, I'm looking at the chat. No, nothing in the chat. Okay, Avery, thank you very much. And the last presentation today is going to be Christine So. Go ahead and take over the screen, Christine.
Okay.
And hang on a sec. Let me get my let me just get my timer set here.
Okay.
All right. Ready, set, go.
Hi everyone, I'm Christine. So I'm an MLA+2 student currently located in Hong Kong. So I conducted a research about the distribution and food accessibility of the unhoused population. especially under the pandemic in the Yaoqingmou district in Hong Kong. So first of all, why the Yaoqingmou district? Because it has always been the highest, it has always been a district with the highest number of unhoused population in Hong Kong. And then under this pandemic, there's a series of new public restrictions that were published. And you will see later why the unhoused population fled from the adjacent districts to the Yaoqingmou district. And in another word, this is the most vulnerable area undergoing homelessness issues when a pandemic situation occurs in Hong Kong. Just to give you a brief context of the Yaoqingmou district, it is also one of the busiest commercial area in Hong Kong. Besides that, it is incredibly expensive to live in. And so the unhoused population basically share their spaces with the tourists daily. With the restriction applied, parks are no longer open 24/7. So many unhoused, including those who lived in the parks in the adjacent district, fled to the underpass in here. And interviewees either have or have seen other unhoused people losing their stable food sources. And the absence of 24-hour hospitals and libraries caused people to flee to the open space in the Cultural Museum here. And since the absence of 24-hour fast food restaurants are no longer available for the unhoused people to stay overnight. And so a large number of refugees in this district fled to the exit L6 of the subway exit. And after interviewing unhoused members in this underpass, I gained interest in the accessibility to food. And at the same time, I started looking at the system of food waste in a more holistic way, just to see where the food waste in the city goes. And so from there, I discovered a flourishing but hidden food network connected by 1.8 tons of food waste and the donation activities happening in the city. The yellow dots are the food donors and the greens are the food beneficiaries in the city. But one thing I found that's not working is that not all the beneficiaries know the food distributing program of each other. So there have been conflicting issues. And one unhoused interview even said that his friends have either died of being too hungry or too full. And so there's misinformation of the availability of food sources among the unhoused people as well. So with the prior research, part of my design project is to focus on enhancing the existing system by better communicating all the available information of food access options for the unhoused people. So I mapped out all the closest walking routes to the location that provides hot meals and food coupons specifically for the unhoused people. And further detail will be shown in the model that is made dedicated to here. And this is a site testing model sitting right above the underpass. The spot that I just pointed out is right above where the unhoused people are located. So you can kind of feel how enclosed the streets are. And this is a testing model for an organic market in the underpass, so it's underneath there. So the underpass is connecting directly with the exit of a subway station. So actually many people would pass through here every day. And this is the section cut of this area. And then I categorized the possible user types in this district, and then the possible spaces that they would enter. And from there, I start to look for opportunity space for enhancing the direction to the hot food location and bringing dignity to eating, and also increasing opportunity, bringing dignity to eating, and also increasing the opportunities for people who are in need of achieving self-sufficiency. And I think I will end my presentation here with some little schemes of my developing design, just so if you are curious. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christine. Any questions? Any questions for Christine on this project? So interesting to see, you know, these issues from one side of the Pacific to the other side of the Pacific, but I'd love to hear if there are questions.
I'll just have a quick comment. Inspiring work from the MLA crew. Kudos to the professors and the students.
All right, well, if there's no other comments or questions, I think as the moderator here today, I'd like to thank all of the students. Thank you for coming. Thank you for sharing your design research work. It's great to see what is happening out there. My understanding is the jury will now confer, and there will be an announcement at some point in the near future of the recognition for these projects. And I will make a plug right now. I've sent a reminder to the faculty, but I'll make a plug regarding the DEI Student Research Awards. Please, if you're here as a student and you haven't seen my email asking you to submit this work for a DEI award, which comes with another cash award attached to it. It's a very simple entry process. You're all well ready to go because you've done all this work. It's just about packaging it a little bit differently, and they're due April 22nd. I look forward to seeing entries from all the students who presented today. So thank you very much. And Luciana, anything you want to say after this session?
No, I think that's all very inspiring work. So this is great. Great to see. Congrats to everybody. Really good work.
Excellent. And I should probably also remind everyone that there's a special talk, Strategic Access to Grant Support, for those of you who are looking to take this to the next step, by James Murday, starting at 4:35. I think the way to get there is to leave the breakout room and go back into the general session. So hope to see everyone back there in the near future. So thank you, everybody, to all the students and all the faculty who came to hear this, and any other guests who have been here today. Thank you, and this closes this session.